Welcome back to the first afternoon of All That Matters. We are talking about the live in sports, media, and entertainment business, the live events business. Possibly, well, it's taken an absolute bashing over the last 9 months, but there have been some interesting developments. A much needed, well, perhaps a much needed move into the digital and virtual space, and some really interesting and exciting innovations. But is it really as good as being there? Or importantly, will we actually be able to be there sometime in the near, medium, or long-term future? To discuss this and more, we have three fantastic speakers with us this afternoon. From very different sides of the industry. We have the CEO of one of the largest venue complexes in Asia Pacific. We have the CEO of the largest esports operator in the world. And we have the global head of sponsorship for one of the most supportive brands to the sports and entertainment business in the world. So we're going to start first with Lionel Yeo, who is the CEO of Sports Hub. And after that, we will meet with Ralph Reichart from ESL and then Kath Gibbs from AIA. But starting with Lionel. Lionel, welcome back to All That Matters. The last time we saw you, I think, was around 2017. You were the CEO of the Singapore Tourism Board. Why not just take us a little bit through your career since then? Where have you been since then?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jasper. Always happy to be at All That Matters. You know, I've been a fan of ATM for a long time. I had a wonderful 6 years at Singapore Tourism Board. You know, we had record highs of visitor arrivals and spend in 2018. Obviously, what a different world we are in now. But at that time, I decided to end my 22-year public sector career on that high and embark on a second career in the great big world outside. So after a break, I sort of landed first at Grab, which is Southeast Asia's, I think, most exciting technology company. I was the CEO advisor working with the two founders and lots of amazing people at Grab. I had the opportunity to join the board of StarHub in 2019, which is a Singapore-based telco. And then towards the end of last year, early this year, I responded to the opportunity to take on the role of Sports Hub CEO, and that's where I've been for the last 7-8 months.
And what an amazing 7 or 8 months they've been. It was a little bit like interviewing Jamie Regal, who started at Formula E at the end of last year. Tell us a little bit more, for those of you who aren't aware, tell us a little bit more about Sports Hub, because it's more than just a stadium, right?
It's much more than a stadium. So it's a multi-destination, multi-facility kind of complex, all 35 hectares of us. We are the region's premier sports, entertainment, and lifestyle destination. So that means we are the go-to in this region when it comes to world-class content like perhaps Manchester United football, BTS concerts, Coldplay concerts. We're also the home of elite athlete training in Singapore, which means that we have the privilege of partnering with our national sports associations to support sports development and elite athlete training. And it's a place where, you know, ordinary Singaporeans just love to come to get their workouts, play, be entertained. So in other words, multiple stakeholders, multiple customer segments.
And then, so tell us a little bit about, I mean, it is a fantastic facility, but tell us a little bit about, you know, what has the last few months looked like for you since you took on the role?
I think just as it's been an experience that the world has, you know, not experienced or not imagined before. I think a lot of people would also not have imagined that the Sports Hub would have had the kind of experience that we had in the last few months. So what happened was, because of the pandemic, obviously the facilities were closed temporarily, and we actually responded to a national call to provide temporary worker housing for migrant workers in Singapore. There was a particularly sharp increase in the number of cases amongst migrant workers in Singapore back in March and April. So we responded to the call to sort of be part of national relief efforts. And we converted the National Stadium, we converted the OCBC Arena, which is our multi-purpose halls, into temporary housing for migrant workers. And that was a 4 or 5 month operation that lasted all the way till the end of last month. And that's, was something which none of us expected we'll be doing. But we were, I guess, proud that we were able to do something to contribute to sort of the national relief efforts. I think also in the last sort of 5, 6 months, we were very much a part of sort of very intensive government and industry engagement, because we are all trying to come together to figure out how do we collectively respond to this pandemic. And that engagement continues as Singapore reopens in phases, as we work with the live events industry to see how we can gradually bring events back to the Sports Hub.
And is anything happening there at the moment? I mean, there's a shopping centre. Is there anything going on at the Sports Hub at the moment?
Oh, yes. So actually, most of the public facilities are open. So, the swimming pool is open for elite athlete training. It's also open to members of the public. Our water sports center, where you can do kayaking, is open. The mall has been open since June again. So all the F&B and the retail is back in business. I think the last piece really is the gradual return of larger scale events to the Singapore Indoor Stadium and the National Stadium.
So the travel, hospitality, and event industry has obviously taken, taking a bashing, has been crippled by COVID. What do you think the future looks like for Sports Hub?
That's a tough one, Jasper. I think our immediate priorities firstly are to make sure that as we reopen our facilities for everyday public use, we do so safely and responsibly. So as you can imagine, there are layers of safeguards that have been put in place to ensure that people can shop at the mall, can come for exercise classes, can train at the pool, can play badminton, in a safe and responsible way. That's the immediate. We are continually looking to see how we can engage with our patrons, our customers, in old ways and new, right? So during the lockdown, when it was not so possible to engage in person, we mounted a lot of virtual programs, a lot of online engagements. And I think what you'll see us continue to do is to both have that online and offline engagement. And in terms of the future is really something that we need to co-create. We meaning, the Sports Hub together with the live events industry and together with the government, crucially. So there are a lot of, if you like, behind the scenes discussions with the government and with industry on how we can reintroduce larger scale events safely and responsibly. There are dozens of reopening plans, templates that have been drawn up, discussed, debated. We actually have tabletop exercises to talk through those, with industry as well as with government. And it's all about, is this good enough? Is this plan good enough? Will it inspire confidence in the public? Will it be good enough to convince our health officials that, we will be able to respond should there be an outbreak? For example, we can do contact tracing with a reasonably sized number of people. So all those kind of plans, I guess, is what is taking up a lot of our time right now. And that's really to ensure that we are able to reopen safely.
This might be a slightly unfair question because I'm not sure if it is to you or not, but the Singapore government recently announced a graduated reopening for the MICE industry, so more for B2B conventions and exhibitions and stuff.
Yeah.
Are you aware of anything there, or is conversations around the entertainment business and sports business?
Well, what we know is that the government is very keen to see how it can restart a lot of these businesses which have been adversely impacted by the pandemic, right? So whether it's business events, which is MICE, or whether it's larger scale sporting and entertainment events, or even arts and cultural events, right? And this is the engagement that we are part of as well. We know that we're not going to go from sort of having nobody at the national stadium to overnight having 55,000 fans again. So the question then is, what is the pathway from 0 to 55,000? And I think we share the measures that were announced for the MICE industry. 250 is not a big number, but it's better than 0, it's better than 5, it's better than 50. So I think the Singapore government has shown that its approach is one which is carefully calibrated. They will not make any hasty moves, and I think they will be, looking at the science. What does the science tell us in terms of what is a safe and responsible way forward? And we intend to be very much a part of that conversation, so that, like I said, we have to co-create this future together with industry partners as well as government.
And then finally, Lionel, just have you seen any? I mean, we talked about there's a lot of plans, there's a lot of initiatives, there's a lot of technology and stuff. Have you seen anything positive coming out of the last 9 months?
Well, there's always a silver lining. It's been a very dark period for the live events industry. But I think what the pandemic has done, obviously, is to make all of us fundamentally rethink. What really are the deep impulses that drive humans to want to get together in a physical space, and we can't do that yet right now in a large scale. But we're thinking about what does it mean when we can. And in the meantime, obviously, as you pointed out, there's a lot of people who have been now sort of alive to the potential of digital engagement, right? Including All That Matters itself. And I think, that's, to me, is not necessarily a bad thing, because I believe we will then emerge out of this pandemic with a much better playbook for engagement, a much better playbook for thinking about how do we create meaningful experiences. And as we were talking before, Jasper, I mean, we all look forward to the day when All That Matters is live again. And I think it wouldn't be a return to the previous formats of live formats. It will be plus, right? So it will be live plus digital, but at the same time, those who attend live, I think there will be, we would have discovered new digital ways in which they can also have a great experience, even if they are in that same seminar room with hundreds of other people.
Well, I think that's great, and I think this idea of emerging with this better playbook is something that's really coming through, even after only one day of All That Matters so far. A lot of people are talking about emerging different, but stronger as well. Lionel, thank you so much. Now we're going to come back to you in a bit, but first we're going to jump now over to Germany, where we're very lucky to be joined by Ralf Reichart, the CEO of ESL, the world's largest esports operator. And before I go to a question, Ralf, please, everyone in the World Wide Web internet world who's watching this, please do post some questions, because we can ask the team a little bit later on. So please post the questions in the little message box below, and we'll pick them up. So Ralf Reichart, the CEO of the world's largest esports operator. Now, please, for those who don't know what ESL is, tell us a little bit more. Who is ESL, and what do you do?
Sure. Hey, thank you for having me, Jasper. It's a pleasure. Digital or physical, doesn't really matter, right? What do we do? I mean, look, if you look back at the history of humankind, right, people started to actually play, then they set rules about their joyful playing, which became games, right, like card games and other games. That then structures got built around this, which people would consider then sport, and then people would start to watch this. That became the sport we know nowadays, called spectator sports. Esport is a very similar idea, right? The only difference is that the play in the games is done with video games, which actually offer most of you to all of you will know it, right? Unbelievably deep experiences, hyper complex ways of playing something much more complex than historically with board games we were able to do. And esports is just taking some of these complex games, building a structure around it, leagues, tournaments, what we call from zero to hero, so amateurs can rise up to the top, up until the very big stadium events we, without pandemics, are doing. And we're building this story, this opportunity for people who play video games to have an infrastructure where they can participate, where they can earn a living, up to the biggest stages in the world where they can become stars and be recognized for something they're outstanding at, where they're the best in the world. And we kind of built this as a business and started 20 years ago, and now 20 years later, this is kind of mainstream and probably the one of the biggest sports in the world, and will inevitably become, come very much to the top as entertainment changes and digital entertainment becomes more actually the center of a lot of our thinking.
So just on ESL, take us through just some of the kind of events you used to do,
Yep.
and maybe some of the events that you are doing now.
Sure. I mean, it's really started with, something in Singapore or Cologne or wherever. It was a very small, tiny tournament where the best people of that city would come from. Because if you think about the pattern in sports, it's always about the best players, right? The best athletes in something. So then we would, and the pattern is we want to create that stage for them so they can be recognized. So historically it was very regional, local, always with a very strong online angle, right? So 20 years ago when we started this, 90% of our content would be produced online, and the only 10%, the final four kind of which would be done offline. This then moved on to become more of a global phenomena because viewership has become such an international one, right? In traditional sports, most of the sports properties are really watched by local people. There's a few outliers, right? But the NFL is obviously watched by Americans primarily, and the EPL by British, and the EPL, the Bundesliga, by Germans. So sports properties, some of them are international, but most of them are really local. With esports, it started a little bit more like tennis, where all of these tournaments kind of had a global viewership. And then we started to create these regional tournaments. That was in 2010 and 9. And then it became really in 2013, 14, which probably was the most visible time of esports becoming a mainstream sport, is when we started to fill stadiums. When this became a true sports viewership experience, when press kind of stopped asking, is this a sport, right? Because they came into a stadium, it's full of people on the stage, they are the 10 best gamers, and it's exactly the same atmosphere as you have in any sports event. So the top of the top, the Wimbledons, how we call it, of esports, that's what we've been trying to build for the last few years. Which are, Grand Slam properties, which hopefully will be there in 100 years, a little bit independent, really, of the game that's being played at that point in time, which are really celebrating more on a cultural level. Because, I mean, if you think about when you go to a Formula One race or to Wimbledon or to the Olympics, there's so much about the social life experience aspect of it. It's actually less about the actual players who are on the pitch. It becomes more than just this sport competition, and I think that's where esports have come the last few months and years, and that we've been building. And we as ESL, we do this all over the world, so we're kind of the only global company there. We have offices from Los Angeles to Sydney. We have one in Singapore as well, Jasper, right? That's where we kind of met, and because every tournament has a global relevance there. We need to work internationally to really capture on that market. And we work with multiple publishers, some of them doing it themselves. Most of them are actually working with third parties because their core business is building the best games in the world, not the best esports. And then we try to build the coolest competition, always with the same aspect of bringing local players to a global stage and creating as much viewership as possible to actually make it a commercializable asset, so that we can actually pay for it.
So give us some examples. What are some of the virtual events, the events that that ESL produce?
Sure. So I'll say So we do around 10 of those mega events, we call them. I'll just name four because they are either, Katowice was the first one in 2013. It's the largest one. Last year, 180,000 people attended it. So it's kind of a mix between a China Joy, Gamescom, and a pure esports tournament. That's our flagship. This year it happened as well. It was last weekend of February, first weekend of March, but without attendees, right? That was then the first COVID hit major event in the Western world. Second one is Is Esl Cologne, which just ended a few weeks ago, which is called the Cathedral of Counter-Strike, the largest indoor venue in Central Europe, sold out for 5 years in a row. It takes some of those legacies for the players you actually can't buy. And then if I look at Asia, right, where the core of this is, we had Intel Extreme Masters Sydney and would have moved this year to Melbourne, actually. So we have an Aussie event, which always lives on the extreme enthusiasm Australians can bring to live events. And then we have, which is actually going on, and we'll come to that later, right? Intel Extreme Masters China, which happened in Beijing this year, which happens as IEM China Beijing this time as well, because what we did for the whole year, we moved those physical events, kept the same name and moved them to an online competition because we obviously assumed that next year or the year after we're going to be back. And this is probably one of our advantages because a competition like this has meaning, right? Wimbledon is more than the prize money. It's because a legacy of 100 years is contributing to it, and that's the same for our tournaments, which are a few years old. That players, regard them not as any other online tournament, but as something that has a history and that brings something to the table you can't really buy.
We've got a couple of questions for you, Ralph. The first one is completely the first one is completely unrelated to this subject, but I'm going to ask you anyway. We've got Diego Correa, who is Warner Music. What's your favorite Beastie Boys album?
Because I'm on camera, I cannot, say any preference. I like them all. Is my very politically correct answer. If not, in a physical event at a beer, I could obviously talk deeper here.
Okay, well, this is what. See, physical events will come back, so we can have a beer with you.
Doubt.
I've got another question now. So Clarence, who's the founder of Bandwagon, big music title in Asia, liked your philosophical explanation of esports. Have there been any meaningful or standout crossovers between esports and music? Now, I think we know there have been, Travis Scott, what have you. I think I'm going to rephrase Clarence's question from, because he's a friend of mine as well. Do you think this will become a new normal?
Do you mean the Travis Scott one?
Yeah, so the crossover between live music and esports.
Yeah, look, I think so the answer is there's been tons of crossovers, right? And every of our event, music is incredibly part of it. I think the new normal, gaming is poised to become the largest, if it's not already, entertainment medium on the planet. And music has a beauty, right? Because it can live within other entertainment forms. Most entertainment forms are on their own, right? And you can't really touch them. Music is kind of the only one which vertically or horizontal, however you look at it, goes through all these other mediums, right? So music's has its own events, but is part of movies, is part of any other sort of sports event, and so on and so forth. And therefore, music and games are, because it's part of that experience, there's no way it's not going to be a big part of it. I think for esports, if we start there, for the live event, for the show, it's incredibly important. Whenever music is there to really support the core experience of a live tournament, it works super well. Whenever it tries to be the center of that, and we've seen multiple examples where it blatantly failed, it's not. What does it mean if you try to do a 1 hour pre-show before the Super Bowl, which is music? People are not coming for the music, right? If it's a 5 to 10 minute halftime show, it actually really works because it's an additional entertainment factor. And we've had exactly the same experience, right? The crisper, the more focused, the more it is adding value to the core tournament, to the core sports, it's good. in video games, because the video games are so versatile. You can do so many things. The live concerts within games are really still just the start, I believe. There is going to be so much more you can do. There's so much more interaction you can do. We're probably day one there or day zero, and in 10 years, we will look back and say, okay, this is mind blowing what we're doing, but why hasn't anyone figured this out earlier? Exactly on what we see with the Fortnite Live concerts those days.
So thank you for those questions, and please do keep them
Yeah.
coming in, people in the World Wide Web. So Ralph, obviously gaming is around heavy technology, and have you seen any really cool stuff coming on? Are you embracing AR, VR, AI, anything that's got a 2-letter acronym?
So the answer is yes and no. I mean, if you look at VR, the install base for the devices in the user's hand is still relatively small, right? So whatever we're doing there, we have done plenty of different things, but you can still see experimental because it's speaking to a niche audience. That's the advantage of AR, right? Because basically you can consume this with any device. So it's more a little bit like we said with music, which is a supportive element on the entertainment side. AR is a supportive element on the broadcast side, so to speak. So if you look one thing, and you're broadcasting from home here, Jasper, right? So you're not in a big studio. What we have done for all of our recent tournaments, generally speaking, if you look back a year, it's not so different than any live sport production, right? We were probably at a 50-60% digitalization workflow, right? So we had most of it digitally, but we still had a physical set. We still had some of those analog things in between. So the pandemic really helped us because physical work is so hard to nearly 100% digitalize this workflow. And that means specifically, if you look in between the games on the studio effects we're doing, on the live sets we're having as a studio, these are nowadays 100% AR. They are 100% green screen produced. So we can really see how we can produce mind-blowing quality, which nearly feels like an event, nearly, in a world where we actually have to produce with 2 people in one room and everyone else is remote. So these kind of things will help us a lot going forward to produce more content at actually a lower price point and probably even higher quality compared to what we were doing before. I think that's really the key one. So on the broadcasting signal side, that's where we have made the biggest leaps in the last few months.
I think this is probably an unfair question, but you look at the gaming industry. Well, I've talked about this before. Is our generation likes to be at events and with other people and hanging out and shoulder to shoulder, going crazy, screaming at our favorite artist or whatever. The next generation, the gaming generation, maybe doesn't. Maybe they like to be at home with the headset on and watching games, but still connecting with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Do you think we will be back in large numbers? Do you want us to be back in large numbers? Does the gaming industry want us to be back in large numbers, or are they happy to be at home?
So I think, if you look at most research and a lot of actually investment hypothesis, event experiences stay very high on the list. So I'm not a believer that they're going to be removed at all. What I believe, and we've believed in it for a long time, and if you look at it, that there's actually always 2 trends, right? That the middle gets squeezed out. So either you have bigger events and fewer of them, like really, those big live music festivals, they're getting bigger and bigger every year, or you have very exclusive small events. Everything in between kind of gets meh, I would say. I think we've seen that with a lot of sports and esports stuff as well. So we believe that we're going to do the legacy, this goosebump feelings, the energy of 10,000 people cheering together is something you, for the foreseeable future, will not be able to replicate digitally. But 1,000 people screaming is kind of there, right? 200 is then intimate again, where it's a personal experience, right? That tribe logic that, up until 150 people, you can kind of, interact with each and one and live with it. So I'm a big believer that this whole in between will actually get smaller and less relevant, but the really big and the really small will continue to strive and are not replicable experiences at this point in time. Who knows where Neuralink and some other technology stuff will bring us in, a few decades. But with the technology we're talking about right now, those live experiences are unique. They are emotionally special and are creating a way of history that people, even on the screens at home, who see it can relate to, and are important actually for all of life entertainment.
That's interesting. Interesting insight. There was a live reimagining live work roundtable this morning, and quite a few people. One of the big insights that came out of it is that small is beautiful, and these more intimate experiences are possible, manageable, and actually, possibly more valuable. So Ralph, listen, thank you so much as ever. Some great insights and some great information and some great knowledge that you've been sharing. Thank you so much. We are going to come back to you, so please don't go away. You're about 10 or 15 minutes to play Sonic the Hedgehog or Pac-Man. But now we're going to go to a brilliant person, brilliant friend, Catherine Gibbs. She is the global or the group head of sponsorship for AIA. We're so lucky to have Kath on this panel because we've got the venue, we've got the content owner, the operator, but now we've got, we've talked to so many people today about partners and how important partners are, even more so this year. So Kath is one of the most important partners in the world today, if you look at the sports and entertainment business. Kath, welcome back to All That Matters. Thank you for joining us from, I think you're in Hong Kong.
Very kind introduction. Thank you.
You're very welcome. But give us a little bit of background again for people that may not know you or some of the initiatives that AIA have undertaken. Let's look back to start with. But who do you work with, and who did what were you up to?
So I think across all of our markets, we're 18 markets across Asia, and they all sort of run by themselves and do their own sort of sponsorship initiatives. And my role, which was actually created about 7 years ago when I came into AIA, is to oversee and develop and manage and create the bigger investment properties that we have, that we sponsor and partner with, and then and certainly all the big regional ones. So I guess if you wanted to know what that sort of suite of assets look like, we are the principal partner with English Premier League football club Tottenham Hotspur. And then we have our global brand ambassador, David Beckham. And then here in Hong Kong, actually, we're the partner of the Hong Kong Observation Wheel and AIA Vitality Park down at the Central Harbourfront. So my role is really about managing those and optimizing the value that can bring to the group, especially on the brand side, but also on the business side as well. So these have been long-term investments, and they, hope we continue to have them. That's the intention. And they really do work very hard for us in terms of delivering on the objectives that we set out to achieve, both on the brand and business side. So that's summary, if you like, of what I do and what I work with.
And it's great to see that you are a long-term partner of these properties. And let's talk about Spurs. As an Arsenal fan, it's quite hard, but let's talk about Spurs and that relationship, because it has gone for quite some time. And how the English Premier League started again this weekend. How has that partnership evolved, going from last year we have packed stadiums and hospitality and stuff? What's happening now?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been really tricky actually with that one, because obviously a big draw card with our sponsorship with Spurs has been the opportunity to send agents, customers, etc., over to London to enjoy that money can't buy experience of watching a game and meeting the players and VIP experiences. So to have the stadiums shut to people and fans has been a big change for us. We still continue to do a lot of digital activation anyway. We support their Player of the Month initiative, which has been still very successful for us in terms of engagement with consumers. But one thing that we found, which became a lot easier for us in terms of not being able to take people over to London, was that we have a couple of coaches, international development coaches, situated in Asia. Now, they also were stuck in, London for some time, but are now came back to the region. And we put them to work developing a lot of content, frankly, that was, again, designed to keep customers and consumers engaged, delivering the messages of health and wellness, because as a life insurance company and with a brand promise of healthier, longer, better lives, and at a time like this that we're all experiencing, health and wellness has never been more relevant and important than now. So where my job has been very important, not just with Spurs, but with what we've done with Beckham and everything else, has been to be able to try and show up constantly as the brand who is delivering on its promise to help people live healthier, longer, better lives. And in doing so, the content has become king for that. And having the partners that we have in Spurs, the Spurs coaches and Beckham, and helping us to continually deliver those messages around health and wellness and what AIA is doing to support people's journeys on that path has been really important. So it's been a lot of digital activation and a lot of content development, as I said, not just the Spurs, but across all our partners.
Take us through a little bit of that, the digital activation you're talking about. I mean, as you know, recently I was in awe of you because you've turned into a virtual event organizer almost single-handedly. But you did organize an event recently with Beckham and some other influencers. Take us through what you did, what happened, what your learnings came from it as well.
Okay, thank you. It was called AIA Live. And what happened was sort of 3 or 4 months into this awful pandemic, we really identified the need that we needed to both re-energize and re-engage, not only with our customers, but with our agency force and distribution channel partners as well. Everyone, the insurance traditionally is very much a face-to-face business. Agents go out and see their clients, etc. So now everyone being locked away from each other, we really saw the need to re-energize and re-engage. And what we came up with was, it was a virtual day of online health and wellness segments, if you like. And what we did was, in each of our markets, well, the key markets anyway, they have some established KOLs or key opinion leaders, influencers, whatever you wish to call them. And the idea was to bring all of those together with our global partners as well on this day of health and wellness online, and provide our customers, consumers and communities the opportunity to be engaged with content and information and subject matter expert pieces and fun things and all things mindfulness, nutrition, exercise, that these global partners and our regional ambassadors could do together. And it was the first time actually we'd brought them all together like that. Excuse me. And what was also really interesting was that we didn't just bring them all together on one day, but we actually brought them together in an interactive way as well. So instead of just the Australian ambassadors talking about a particular content piece here, and then we'd go to Singapore and an ambassador would talk about something there, we would actually have them up against each other talking about a similar topic. So what that was designed to do was to really drive this idea of social connectedness. And I think that that's what everyone across the world has learned during these times, is their need to be socially connected, but also to to really pull down the borders and have this shared experience of what everyone is going through. And so it was really terrific in that way, because we was able to celebrate cultural diversity and the different approaches to the same sorts of health and wellness topics that everyone has. So we were very pleased with it. We had terrific results. It was the first time we'd ever done it, and it was pulled together in about 7 weeks, which I still can't believe we were able to achieve. But it was great. We reached 40 million odd on social through it. We had 1 million people were engaged directly through the camp, through the program during the lead up and during the day post. We had 60 countries viewing and 37,000 viewers on the day itself. So phenomenal for us in terms of a first, certainly a first, I think, for the industry as well. A first for AIA, a first for all our ambassadors and coming together with our global partners. And actually off the back of it, we're now going to be launching soon a regional ambassador program, which effectively is going to be pulling these ambassadors together with the likes of Beckham into sort of an ongoing platform of sharing and co-creation of ideas around health and wellness that will be, within a sort of structured framework, leveraging across all of our markets to all our consumers. So a lot of learnings came from it. Certainly there are things that can be tweaked and enhanced, but I think overall what we saw was that there is a yearning for this sort of content. And I think, again, as I said, breaking down the borders and having this cultural diversity, talking about the same topics from different perspectives was really powerful. So yeah, it was an interesting event, and we're going to be doing it annually, if not biannually, moving forward.
It's so cool. I remember when you described it to me. It was So I was so impressed with what you did, and you pulled it off. I know maybe not single-handedly, but you didn't have a very big team doing it. So we're very happy to help in the future. You mentioned shameless plug there. You mentioned ambassadors and influencers, and there is one obviously very famous influencer that you work with in Mr. Beckham. But how do you work with influencers? Is it just Beckham? Are there others? And how do you kind of employ them in your role?
Well, frankly, the KOLs and influencers I was really referring to just then across the region are managed and contracted and sought out by the local markets themselves. So they frankly have come up with who their ambassadors are and how they manage them and use them. I specifically focus, lucky me, on Mr. Beckham being our brand ambassador. So bringing them together like we just have and will continue to do moving forward is kind of going to be a bit new to me even. But in terms of Mr. Beckham, I mean, he, needless to say, he has a tremendous following and tremendous power in attracting and influencing the audiences that we are wishing to speak to as well. So he's been wonderful to work with and a wonderful ambassador as well, because I think the key thing for us with everything that we do, and even in the selection of influencers and KOLs in markets, the critical thing to make sure that there is authenticity. And I think if your ambassadors are really behind what you are doing as an organization, behind what your purpose is as an organization, then the authenticity shines through, and it's really, really important to have that connectedness in that way. And for Beckham, we are the only brand, so to speak, where he doesn't plug our products, brand partner of his. He joined us because he believed in what we were doing around health and wellness. And we have a health and wellness program called AIA Vitality. So actually it's at the fundamental core of everything that we do under our Healthier, Longer, Better Lives brand promise. And that really attracted him to us. And since then, as we've been able to go out to our markets with him, everything that we've done through campaigns with him, online and offline, he's been a tremendous advocate for everything that we're doing, and conversely, so the audiences really respect that back in terms of how we're using and how they respond to him being there, because everything he says it's believable and it's relatable. It's tricky when you have someone like that who's a global icon, who is clearly sort of in a different atmosphere to the rest of us almost, and to try and make him still relatable to the people that we're talking to was always going to be the challenge. But I think because he's truly believes in the drive and the momentum that we're creating around health and wellness, it comes out sincerely from him and in a very authentic way. So he's been tremendous to work with in doing what we've been doing. And even at when the world went down into lockdown, mid-February or into March, he was too. And, it's not often that you would have said to him, or I wouldn't have believed I could say to him 6 months or 7 months ago, could you film something on your iPhone for us, and send it out? Because normally these people, they take a bit more time to get prepared for these sorts of things. But he was fantastic. And we did a fan engagement piece with him from his home in lockdown, to our consumers and fans across Asia. And it was really about, tell us, a shout out to our audiences. How are you coping in lockdown? What are some of the ideas that you're coming up with to keep healthy and well and also motivated? And it became a very personalized story between what he was sharing and what our fans were sharing back, because of course family played a key role in what everyone was doing in lockdown and how they were staying well and connected with each other. And so it was the first time, and probably won't be the last time now in this new norm, where he really did shine through in that very authentic way, and personal and relatable way for our audiences. So I'm hoping that this regional ambassador program will continue achieving that. And I think in this new world that we live in, I think that's what our consumers and audiences are looking for too, that authenticity.
Kath, as ever, I could talk to you for ages, and we are actually going to bring the panel back in a second. But we do. Please remember, ladies and gentlemen, in the World Wide Web, please do get your questions in for Lionel, Ralph, and Kath. But thank you. It really is a fascinating story of authentic transformation, and over a very short space of time, and clearly very successful with 60 million views. We're clearly going to be doing something similar to that today, I imagine, for this panel alone. But I've got one more question. What does the future look like for AIA and in the context of this conversation?
Well, I mean, need I say it's digital, and I think as a business we were picking up on the digital speed anyway. As an industry on the whole, insurance has not been terribly at the forefront of digital innovation. And again, it's going back to just that traditional way and the agency force that we have, which is a very face-to-face business. But what we've seen even in the last 6 months is consumer behaviours have had to change. We've seen a 25% increase in the number of people searching for life insurance. I mean, obviously during these times, but online first. And so it's really important that we are showing up at the right time with the right message to the right audience. And, digital is the way that we do that quickly, effectively, and with dynamism. So, as an organization, digital technology enhancements are critical, and from a brand and marketing point of view, even more so. It's really just a matter of upping the ante on what we've done, and I think it's just about keeping on the pulse of what consumers want and need and where they are. And so that's going to be the happy challenge moving forward, I think, and making sure that you keep fresh and authentic with everything that you're doing. But it's all digital.
That's fantastic. I mean, hopefully digital with an element of live when we're allowed to, of course. So let's bring. Thank you so much, Kath, and let's bring Lionel and Ralph back into the room, and please do get questions in if you want them asked. Very rare opportunity to have one of Asia Pacific's largest venue complexes, the world's largest esports producer, and one of the most wonderful, supportive brands on the planet. What's not to love? So we've talked about business, we've talked about venues, and we've talked about content and digital and stuff. Let's make this a little bit more onto a personal basis now, and just a few questions for you before we wrap. So I think, Lionel, back to you here. With everyone working from home and what have you, and obviously you've gone through a dramatic transformation in your new job. What's one thing, I'm going to ask all of you this question, by the way, but Lionel first, what is one thing that you are doing now that you were not doing before COVID?
Well, I didn't have the opportunity to work from home as much. And, it's been, I think this is something which globally has just been one of those things which all of us realize there's good things about working in the office, and there's good things about working remotely. And why didn't we come to this realization sooner? Why did it have to take something like the pandemic to make us realize that, some hybrid approach works very well. Some companies have gone completely work from home, but I just think it's one of the many wake-up calls that the pandemic has given us, just to rethink, workplace culture, rethink workplaces.
Good, very good answer. And also, we've turned our homes into studios as well, as you can see. Actually, Lionel, while you're there, we have a question from Cesali at SPH. You said the National Stadium will not go from 0 to 55,000 overnight, but when do you think it will? Before 2021 is up or beyond?
Very hard to tell. Based on my former life as a civil servant and a scenario planner, I can tell you the two critical uncertainties are, number one, what is the pace of scientific development? And number two, what is the state of international cooperation? You need both of those two critical uncertainties to be working in the same direction, in the right direction, before we can get back to that 55,000 in a national stadium. And so I'm watching those two very closely. When you have one without the other, it doesn't quite work. You get a middling kind of scenario where you muddle through, you get stops and starts. Some economies will open and then close down again. And obviously, when you get those two critical uncertainties going in the wrong direction, then I think, hang on, this is going to be a long ride.
Yep. Good answer. Ralph, back to you, sir. What are you doing now in your life that you weren't doing pre-COVID?
I think it's two things. It goes to the same thing Lionel said, right? I'll expand a bit on that. We as a company, and this is more general, we were founded in Cologne, right? So we have a headquarter in Cologne. We have around 40% of our global people. So everyone sitting in headquarter always had a huge information advantage, which made it really frustrating. And we've heard that feedback many times before for people not sitting in headquarter. I think everyone who works in an international company knows that feeling, that there's so much, in between communication that's not done through the official digital channels, including email we do these days, that becomes frustrating. So COVID kind of created an even playing field. So people who are not sitting in the headquarter right now have the same access to information than anyone else because we're working from home. That has been a game changer for us on so many different fronts. And to expand on that on a personal level, right, working from home enables you to do some sportive activities, which we're all missing back in the we travel all day and spend 2 hours in the car going to it and back from work. That I personally totally enjoyed, which makes me feel like that this has on the one side, a real personal game changer for me. Because I've been doing more sports in the last 6 months than probably in the 6 years before.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that, Ralph. And then finally, same question to you, Kat. What are you doing now that you weren't doing pre-COVID?
Well, I mean, I certainly have about 50 to 100 more WhatsApp groups. And I think what I'm doing a lot more now than I was last year is chatting on them. But I think the point there really is what, one of the wonderful things that has come out of this is people have learned to communicate again, and reach out. And so, a lot of these chat groups are friends and associates I haven't heard from for years and years and years. And suddenly we're all, recommunicating again and sharing stories, and it's really lovely. So I think I'm definitely on WhatsApp a lot more than I was last year.
It's a very good point. This has got absolutely nothing to do with this session whatsoever. But if anyone out there is, if Zuckerberg is watching, as he probably is, can we have a sort function in WhatsApp, please? So we can see the messages we haven't read and sort them the same way we can with emails. Anyway, that's an aside, because you're right. There is so much going on WhatsApp right now, and it gets buried within 5 minutes, and then that's it. Okay, Kat. Whilst you still have you there, final question to the panel is advice. We love asking everyone this question. What advice would you give to your 15-year-old self?
That's really tricky. I don't know. I mean, if it's a question about what would, where we are today and what would you have done differently, I think from an employment point of view, I think a critical piece, and this is not just because of this year, but I think just the state of the world progressively over the last decade or so has really been this issue and complexities around mental health. So I think if I were to have my time again, or to advise myself back then, knowing what the future held, would be to get into counselling or psychology or something that supported, communities and mental health issues. I know that's not really advice, but it's what would I have done differently? Maybe, I don't know.
That's a great answer.
I think that's a hugely topical area now.
And Ralph, advice for your 15-year-old self? I mean, I always say get into gaming, but you did it.
That's such a hard thing, right? It's I mean, the one thing that I think we've all learned, right, is that hard work is always more important than talent. Talent is kind of a starting point for everything we're doing. You need to have some talent, but actually never the one with our biggest talent wins. It's a big misconception. So if we really want something, we say in gaming a lot of times, if you have the will to win, you will win.
Good answer. And then finally, Lionel, advice to your 15-year-old self?
I think, Jasper, I would say, I would remind myself to always enjoy the moment. You're only going to be 15 once, you're only going to be 25 once, 35, 45, whatever it is. Don't sweat the small things. No matter how tough the situation is, just it is a unique experience. And I think, be mindful and be kind to people around you and enjoy the moment.
I would love this conversation to keep going on, but we are out of time at the end of a very long day. I've written a ton of notes, but all around co-creation, digital to a point, until we're allowed back at events, one hopes. We talked about whether we'll end up with bigger events but fewer of them, and smaller events, but whether that kind of middle ground will be wiped out or almost disappear. We talked about how influencers, ambassadors, and partnerships are so important for AIA, and that whole story of authenticity coming through as well. So a really fascinating story of how a brand has transformed very quickly into the digital space. But yes, it is. This week is all about digital. But for the three of you, I do hope that I can see you back in Singapore live this time next year, mainly because my house is right next to a playground and there's kids screaming all day at the moment, and you don't hear that in the Ritz-Carlton. But ladies and gentlemen of the World Wide Web, please thank Lionel Yeo, Ralph Reichart, and Catherine Gibbs. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us, Jasper. It was a pleasure.